Learn to improve conversions and generate more leads with the video podcast at marketingoptimization.tv.
Welcome to the Marketing Optimization Podcast with Alex Designs. I'm your host, Alex Harris. To get started, what's your definition of optimization and why is it beneficial?
Oh, that's one of the best questions, actually, for the beginning. Thanks. I would say there are two ways that you can do optimization. One way is you look around, and if you find something like a barrier, a problem, whatever, you optimize it. Mm-hmm. I don't like this way of thinking, and that's unfortunately like most optimizers think of. I think of optimization in a more economical way. So let's say you're a €100 million retailer, and you could be able to do like 20 optimization sprints a year, mm-hmm. and each gives you an average uplift of 5%. So can you calculate the number of dollars that this optimization will make for you? So it's maybe around 20 or 25 million dollars or euros or whatever. So my way of optimization means to find out what is your growth potential, what do you have to do to lift this potential, mm-hmm. and that's optimization. Everything else is trial, error, and testing around.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. As I've grown and do conversion for a while, a lot of times in the early days, I was doing a lot of the slicing, dicing type of testing, mm-hmm. like everyone else. But as I've even had this podcast and interviewing people like you, I've been able to optimize my own framework to get better results. And I think actually one of the aspects that I'm actually missing in my own framework is realizing really that growth potential. I know that I get 10-15% increase per test. How does that relate to the amount of revenue and put into growth? Is there like a growth formula that you go through to kind of figure that out?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated. When we start to work with a client, we do kind of an economical analysis and try to figure out that potential in euros. Mm-hmm. The good thing is that we have a lot of clients that we work for since a couple of times. So we have some numbers out of our experience, and we can say that to reach a 20-30% uplift a year is nothing magic. It's absolutely possible. Mm-hmm. But most people didn't deliver the proof for this in their companies. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's the biggest conversion killer is actually not on your website. It's inside the organization that doesn't dare to handle a big optimization program and to get the 25%. I would say, most people just optimize around or test around, and that's a big problem, I think.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I know when my potential target client comes to me, they had maybe installed Optimizer or Visual Website Optimizer, and they were kind of playing around, and they were trying to improve their ROI from their pay-per-click ads, and they just were getting inconsistent results. So they've reached a plateau, and now they really had to actually hire a consultant.
Yeah, and that's what happens a lot of times when people are testing around. Mm-hmm. They are just testing on spots of the customer journey. We should be more customer-centric as optimizers. So we should realize that if you want to optimize something, you're optimizing an experience because you want to change the behavior of people. So what's the influence of just one page inside this big customer journey? Mm-hmm. It's maybe very small. So I would say this is why maybe you can argue you get a bigger click-through rate or whatever. But if you test the whole customer journey for the main goal that is revenue or order conversion rate, you will see maybe this doesn't have a big impact. And that's what I would like to say. It's important to test in flows. It's so much more effective to ask yourself, what kind of idea or experience do I want to get into the mind of my customers, and where do I have to place it so it really gets into their minds? Mm-hmm. So for me, to test just, for example, landing pages, or just test on a product page, or just test on your cart page, could be a waste of time. You have to optimize the whole flow.
Mm-hmm. So let's break down how would in my case with like e-commerce, Ideally, we find that 80/20, they're making 80% of their revenue off of 20% of their pages. So we usually start with about that 20%. So let's say we start with a product page or a category page. Once we know what wins on those particular pages, then we start to scale it to the universal templates. Is that kind of like the mindset that you're thinking?
Yeah, of course. You could do so. But you have to be aware. A lot of times when we tested things like in an earlier stage of the funnel or in an earlier area of the customer journey, we found out that this gets you an uplift in this area, but leads to a worse performance for the rest of the customer journey. So I think it's like expectation management. Like if you have a real brick and mortar store at the high street and you polish all your how is it called, the windows where the products are, okay, and everybody thinks, woohoo, this is now so much better, I will go inside the store. But inside it looks crappy as before, so people would be even more demotivated when you just like polish the early stages of customer journey. So you have to see it as a whole thing. That's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking into account the actual cart page, the checkout process, even lifetime value from them coming back as new versus returning visitors, and then coming back and probably redoing the homepage. So after we hit local maxima, optimizing as much as possible, then we're kind of in. We're ready for basically a bigger redesign. We'll take a lot of the ideas of what has won and then move to more of a redesign, that iterative process. Is that kind of like your same approach?
Yes, I think it fits to the approach. As long as you go for the bigger task and try to scale your learnings for the whole customer journey, then it's good. But I think there's a big risk. You could do 20 A/B tests a year, and that's what I call testing around. If you're only testing on certain spots, this could be completely ineffective for your global conversion rate. So somebody who's responsible for spending all the money for optimization will ask yourself at the end, you've done 20 tests and like 15 of them were successful. So, but I still have the same conversion rate after 1 year. So where did my money go? And then you maybe have to confess that you did not effectively optimize the whole conversion rate. You did a lot of small optimizations on certain spots, but they did not lead to an overall increase of conversion rate.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to take it up a next step and ensure that it's not just pretty pictures that you're improving, but making it really customer centric. And I know you speak a lot about that. So how would you understand what's going on in the customer's mind and then leverage that to continue to improve growth?
I'm a big fan of multiple qualitative methods. So here at WebArts, we do a lot of user research. So we have real one-to-one interviews with eye tracking. We do kind of association tests to find out what people really feel when they see a website. So what's like their implicit perception. That's important. It's an important thing because people have kind of they develop a story in their mind, what they think that an offer is like, but like 90% of the time this story is completely wrong. And that's funny to find out. So this is why we do user research. Of course we do like expert evaluation, what's I would say the most important technique for all optimizers, because it's very efficient and it's very easy to do. We focus on psychological aspects because a user in a usability lab will never tell you about his implicit process, his unconscious things. So that's the second column of analyzing a website. And the third column or pillar is the third pillar is personas. I'm a big fan of personas and customer journey mapping because that gives you a completely other view on this topic. So, and if you put all these things together, you should have a clear image. What's your problem? On what topics do you have to work on? And a lot of times it's not about details and buttons. It's about how is the brand, the positioning of a company, how is it perceived by people. It's about value propositions, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely learned that along the way. Personas are so important. What happens to that customer even before they arrive at your page?
Yes.
What are those emotional triggers that make them put that
Yes.
query into Google before they arrive at your category page, your
Yeah.
landing page, and your product page?
Yeah.
You know, it, I know you work on bigger brands, but maybe how would small and mid-sized businesses kind of think about that differently, and then kind of map out? You talked about the expert evaluation. Can you just speak to exactly what that is?
Oh, with expert evaluation, there are a lot of frameworks for analyzing websites, like the lift model from Wider Funnel. We have our own framework. It's called the 7 levels of conversion. So it's unfortunately in German. So maybe the rest of the world doesn't know about it. But this is kind of the internal checklist of each consumer that he goes through before he's buying something. So like first level is relevance. If something's not relevant to you, you will in 1 second you will bounce and go to another page. So you can do this kind of expert evaluation, like a cognitive walkthrough. You go through all the pages and take these elements and compare your website with this element. Ask yourself, how can we increase the relevance of our landing page, for example? And you do this not just for your own website. It's good to do this as well for your competitors' websites. So you learn a lot and you see things you didn't see before, like, damn, this competitor website, they did it so completely right to hit exactly like the implicit motivation of our persona. So this is why personas, expert evaluation, all these things, they work perfectly together. Without a persona, it's so hard to do expert evaluation.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm starting to realize. How if you want to become a master at this, there there's so many different ways to do the exact same thing. Us as consultants or marketers, we have to figure out the right ways that work for our particular scenarios.
Yes.
Now the testing pattern, trying to fit as many tests in per year, the pattern that I've followed for small mid-sized businesses has been between 3 or 4 weeks running about a test, and while that test is running, we're trying to determine the best possible test next. Sometimes there's some development gaps in between that, but maybe I'm getting some coaching here, but is that the ideal scenario of kind of like the test patterns?
Yes, of course. And if you can afford it, you could do even more tests. So it's not that complicated, for example, to do parallel testing. So especially for mid-size or bigger companies, I would recommend to ask yourself, how can we set up different testing tracks so we can even do more tests? And I'm a big fan of having tests run for more than 2 weeks. And also not longer than 4 weeks. Why? If it's less than 2 weeks, then your sample, it's not about the size, it's about the, can you say representativeness?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
In English, nearly? Close to it.
The association, yeah.
Yeah. So, for example, buyers at the beginning of the month, they have maybe more money because they just got their loan, okay? At the end of the month, their buyer behavior is different. So it's important to have a representative sample. That's why I think you should do more tests, run them longer, and if you have enough resources, do some tests parallel, but let them run for at least 2 weeks. So you have all the days, all the different traffic sources, like newsletter. It's, I think, the worst case to stop a test after 3 days just because the tool says, nah, it's significant. Maybe you will lose the significance after 2 weeks. So let it run longer.
Right. Yeah, and that brings us to something that I talked to actually Pep Laya about. He mentions that he likes to let his tests run for their total amount of sales or conversions about 250, and sometimes it's hard to really get that for my small mid-sized businesses between like a 4-week period of time. So we've always made the benchmark around 100 sales or 250 leads. How do you feel about that scenario?
Oh, this is a very difficult question because it depends on your traffic and it depends on your uplift. So from a mathematical point of view, if you want to prove that an uplift of maybe, let's say, 15% is significant, then a sample size of 200 conversions per variation would be enough. But for example, in e-commerce, you should expect much lower uplifts. So with that sample size, it's not possible to get a 3 or 4% uplift significant. So it always depends on your. That's why we should use traffic and conversion or A/B testing calculators to calculate the test duration for our A/B test and not stop it until we reached significance.
And a lot of times when we first start an initial client project, we'll run an AA test to see how long it takes us to get there. Is that still kind of getting the validity?
Of course, because you should know if your testing tool runs properly. And for a lot of clients, we do AA/BB tests because then you can see how much error you still have in your sample. And when AA and BB equals, then you see the real uplift. That's good to be sure, but you need a lot of traffic to do this. So if you have smaller sample sizes, it would be nearly impossible to work like this. But for big clients, it's a question of if they have 1 or 2.5 million in an uplift. It's important to have the exact number and to work on a high level of statistical validity. And then we recommend to do every test in an AA/BB scenario.
Very interesting. And one more question before we switch gears. So let's say we've reached our local maxima and we're ready to start doing a redesign. A lot of times with these hosted e-commerce solutions, we'll suggest that we actually run to the new site and the old site and test those as well. Is that a good approach? Yep.
It's a perfect approach. We call it a soft launch, because if you run these websites parallel and you invested a little bit of time in your analytics, so you really made sure that you can measure the same parallel in two shops, you can do a lot of great things. And to really ensure that your new shop performs better, you can't do it without working like this, I would say.
Yeah.
Because you learn so much what happens in the flows in add to cart rates and how many people do use filters, which do they use. So there's so many small things that you maybe don't see if you don't let your shops run parallel for maybe 2 or 3 months and do all this kind of optimizations in the new shop until it's really better. I would say this is completely best practice.
Yeah, that's a good point, because QA does become very important, and you can't get real QA unless you get real customers going through it.
Yes,
absolutely.
That's right.
So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Austin, Texas. What do you have a plan for what you're going to be speaking at during the conference?
Yeah, I will be speaking about conversion strategy and like for all the optimizers that are like successfully optimizing already, what do they have to do to think bigger? So what's the difference between testing around and getting these 25 million? That's why I call it the $1 million strategy. So yeah, how do I think big? How do I think big? What are like some hurdles or barriers that I have to know? And yeah, that will be my talk.
Awesome. Yeah, and if you want to know more about the conference, you can just visit the website live.conversionxl.com. Let's tell people how they can find out more about you. Maybe mention your Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter handle is Morys, Morys. And yeah, I'm tweeting, I would say 80% in English, 20% in German. I'm sorry, a lot of things I publish are in German, so I have a blog called ConversionXL.de. So everybody who's understanding German is welcome to read my blog or my book, but unfortunately there's not so much stuff in English. I have a LinkedIn profile, so you can connect with me there.
Awesome. Yeah, I was actually watching some of the videos, and I was listening to you, and there's a translator going over it. I was like, I think I was learning German and translation at the same time.
That was funny because that was Conversion Summit in Istanbul, which was amazing with 700 people, and that was translated into Turkish. So
yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah, that was really interesting. All right, well, to close out, what would be one thing that you would tell optimizers to do to really take their conversion rates to the next level?
Yeah, think big, think in high contrast, and always ask yourself, how can I change the behavior of my client? Too many people are thinking in templates and buttons and designs. Stop that.
Yeah.
Think in behavior and how you can change it.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Learn to improve conversions and generate more leads with the video podcast at marketingoptimization.tv.